Hello everybody, welcome to the Wonky Angle, where I talk about electronic music, both new and old. And today I'm going to be talking about the new album from The Orb, Moonbuilding 2703 AD. So this year's had a lot of old bands coming back with a new album, like The Prodigy and The Chemical Brothers and many others. But one of the more pleasant surprises of this year was The Orb coming back. Now, I've been a fan of these guys for a long time. I discovered them thanks to their similarity to another one of my favorite bands. Though it hasn't been that long since they released a new project, their last one was in 2012. Now, a lot of different people have contributed to this project, but the only two that matter for this review are Dr. Alex Patterson and Thomas Fellman. Dr. Alex is the only consistent member of the band throughout its existence, and Thomas Fellman has kind of been on the project on and off since their third album, Orbis Terrarum. Dr. Alex is obviously the brains of the operation, having been on every single one of the Orb's projects. In addition to contributing some great beats and melodies, he usually specializes in intense but lighthearted weirdness, usually filling songs with tons of vocal samples from all sorts of different sources. Thomas Fellman, on the other hand, tends towards darker, much more straightforward ambient material. And together, you get this weird blend of ambient and dance music that is most commonly referred to as ambient house. Now, of course, Dr. Alex and Thomas Fellman are far from the only people responsible for this fascinating sound. Heck, Fellman wasn't even a full-time member of the Orb until later on. The Orb has had a lot of different members, including, but not limited to, Andy Hughes, Chris Weston, Martin Glover, aka Youth, even Jimmy Cauty of the KLF, the latter of which was one of the founding members of the Orb back when it started in 1989, 1990, somewhere around there. But I could go on about these guys for hours, and it wouldn't matter much because none of those people are on this latest project. This one is only Dr. Alex and Thomas Fellman. Now, I do have a lot to say about The Orb, and I'm hoping to eventually cover their other albums in separate videos, but for now, I'll just give you guys a brief synopsis of what I think of their discography so far. This is one of my all-time favorite albums. 2 glorious hours of memorable melodies, strange samples, outlandish science fiction, ambient and dance music. Definite must listen. Now, here's a more dance-oriented effort. As it's only half the length of Adventures Beyond the Ultraworld, I can't say I like it as much, but it's still excellent, and a must listen. This was actually the first Orb album that I heard. Probably not a great place to start in retrospect, but still, the attention to detail on this album is amazing. I will warn you, it is significantly less dance-oriented than their other efforts, so watch out for that, but I still highly recommend checking this out. This is actually a pretty good summary of the Orb's sound in general. To be completely honest, it's not really one of my favorites, but it is still great. This album has a terrible reputation for some reason, and I could not tell you why that is. I actually think this is brilliant. It's probably their weirdest album, but hey, I love their brand of weird. And this one's alright. This one's dominated by Fellman. There are some great moments on it, but I have a tough time getting into it. Not really one of their better ones. This one's dominated by Dr. Alex, and I absolutely love it from start to finish. And this one's alright. It's The Orb collaborating with David Gilmour. Awesome. It's The Orb collaborating with Lee Scratch Perry. It's pretty good, but I could use a little more variety. Which brings us to this album, their 12th to date. So, it's been a long and bumpy road leading up to this album. They've left behind quite an impressive legacy. So how does this one turn out? Well, I can tell they are trying to return to their 90s sound, though this one does come close to the same sounds found on Adventures Beyond the Ultraworld or UF Orb. It doesn't. This album isn't just a cheap rehash of their old sound, it's something new entirely. For one thing, it's kind of structured in an interesting way. There's only 4 songs, and the shortest one is 9 minutes, the others being 13-14 minutes long. Now, the Orb making super long extended pieces is absolutely nothing new. However, unlike most Orb albums, I don't really feel like the individual 4 tracks on this album has a real identity outside of the album. That is to say, the album just flows together as one big extended piece. All these tracks just seem to wander around and switch between ambient, beat-oriented. There's influence from all across the board. I hear jazz, I hear funk, I hear hip-hop. The Orb has credited Jay Dilla as a big influence for this album. They even have a tribute track to him on certain versions of the album. But everything's held together by the atmosphere and just the overall feel of the album. When you first start the album, you're greeted with this vocal sample.
If you believe in evil, then you probably need a whack on the back of the neck with a big fucking stick.
Hearing that sample instantly put a smile on my face because that is just totally the kind of sample that Alex Patterson likes to use. But actually, there really weren't that many vocal samples on this album. It gives the album a strangely isolated feel to it that I haven't really heard on an Orb album thus far. I mean, sure, Okie Dokie It's the Orb on Compact felt pretty isolated too, but not like this. It's strange, it's unfamiliar, it's like exploring a whole new world. You do hear a lot of the same sounds over the course of the album, and the tempo is pretty much exactly the same throughout, but the 4 individual tracks on this album do have some variation between them. So first there's God's Mirrorball. This track starts out pretty slowly with the above-mentioned vocal sample, then grows into a pretty fun dance track, then shrinks back into ambient, then grows into a slightly different song, and does it again one more time. So there's like 3 different dance tunes within this song. It's probably the most straightforward out of all the songs on the album though. After that we got Moonscapes, 2703 BC. This has a steady disco beat throughout, but it continually changes melody and samples every couple of seconds, even gradually changing the beat up over the course of time. The downside of this is that we don't usually get a sample or a melody that sticks around for long enough to really get stuck in your head or become catchy. It feels like you're just walking by and admiring the scenery without, like, making a note of where exactly you are. Then there's Lunar Caves. That song is very similar to Moonscapes, but it's a lot more ambient. There isn't quite as much beats. I also get kind of a vague Kraftwerk-ish feel to this particular track. They even sample Kraftwerk at the beginning of the song. Finally, the title track, Moonbuilding 2703 AD. This closes out the album. This one also kind of seems to meander around a lot, but it does so a lot more slowly and gradually so that the melodies stay around long enough to become memorable. Also, this song, kind of like Moonscapes, has a very strong disco flavor to it. It still has that subtle and mysterious feel to it that the rest of the album does, but it feels a bit more structured than those other ones. But anyway, this album may be constantly changing, but it still feels like one cohesive whole. The melodies, samples, etc. do all sound similar enough that if you were to just play this in the background, you wouldn't notice a single track had passed. Unless you've listened to it like 20 times or something. But yeah, overall, this is a really good album, one of their best in years. It's got the themes and atmosphere of parts of Adventures Beyond the Ultraworld. It's got a lot of the sounds and feel on Okie Dokie It's the Orb on Compact. And it's got the spaciousness and attention to detail on Orbis Terrarum. And the result is something truly unique in the Orb's discography. It might not have as much of that quirky, lighthearted sense of humor found on other Orb releases, but what we do get is an amazing listening experience that really captures you with its atmosphere, and one that is still distinctly the Orb. If you're not already an Orb fan, I would highly recommend checking out some of their earlier stuff first, Adventures Beyond the Ultraworld, UF Orb, etc. But I wouldn't say you necessarily have to be familiar with their work in order to enjoy this. Overall, feeling an 8 8.7 out of 10 on this one. Favorite tracks? You know what, screw that. I don't really have any favorite or least favorite tracks. If I absolutely had to pick a least favorite, it'd be Lunar Caves, because that one ended more quickly than the others. Kinda wish it lasted longer, but yeah, I don't think I really can pick favorites and least favorites on this one. But yeah, that's pretty much it. If you heard this album, make sure to tell me what you thought about it in the comments, or if you have any requests for what I should review next, make sure to also tell me about that. And that's pretty much it. That's all for today. See you next time.